You wake in the middle of the night, heart pounding, not from a nightmare, but from the strange emptiness that has begun to stalk your waking hours. You feel it most in the quiet moments when the world is still and you are left with the self you never truly knew. The thoughts that creep in are not random. They are whispers, shadows, echoes of parts of you you've been too afraid to face. You realize, with a kind of cold lucidity, that life has been moving around you while you have been moving through a fog. You cannot ignore it anymore. This isn't just dissatisfaction or a fleeting melancholy. This is a summons from your own psyche, a call to confront what you have exiled, rejected, or hidden behind the masks of duty, approval, and habit. It begins as a faint ache, a sense that something essential is missing, and then the shadows arrive, not as ghosts or monsters, but as aspects of yourself you have denied. Envy, rage, fear, shame, desire, grief. These are not failures or weaknesses. They are signals pointing to the unfinished work of your soul. Carl Jung called this hidden realm the shadow, the collection of everything you disown, yet which seeks recognition and integration. The shadow is not an enemy. It is the secret ally of your wholeness. Every time you push it down, it grows in cunning, waiting for a moment when the ego's defenses falter. And eventually, it will demand your attention. Perhaps you have tried distraction work, relationships scrolling endlessly through lifeless feeds, but the shadow is relentless. It whispers in dreams, colors your reactions, influences your choices, and shows up in the people who trigger you the most. You see their flaws, their arrogance, their cruelty, and yet the echo is unmistakable. These are reflections of your own unclaimed parts. The world becomes a mirror, and the shadow's hand is everywhere. To live without seeing it is to wander in a half-life, guided by illusions and half-truths. But to see it, truly see it, is terrifying. You must descend into a darkness you've spent a lifetime avoiding. You must confront the parts of yourself that society, family, and even you have labeled unacceptable. And here is the paradox. The descent is also liberation. The shadow is not only a place of fear, it is a treasury of energy, creativity, and authenticity. The anger you have repressed, the grief you have denied, the desires you have silenced, each is a seed of life. Each is a doorway to vitality, to self-knowledge, to freedom. But to step through, you must first be willing to look. You must answer the question Jung posed, though it frightens you. Who am I when no one is watching? Not the persona you show the world, not the mask you wear, but the totality of yourself. In light and shadow, beauty and beast, love and fury. Before we dive deeper, take a moment, breathe. Let yourself feel the tension of anticipation, the weight of unacknowledged parts stirring within you. This video is not entertainment. It is an invitation, a call to engage with the living, breathing mystery that is your own psyche. If you stay, if you open yourself, if you confront what has been hidden, your life will never be the same. And if you are ready to embark on this journey, like, share, and subscribe to walk this path together. For there is strength in acknowledgement and courage in community. Chapter 1 begins not in a technique or instruction manual, but in experience, in the raw encounter with your own shadow. You have hidden your rage, tucked it away beneath politeness, behind smiles, under the guise of reason. But rage is alive. It has a pulse. It reminds you of where your boundaries have been violated, where your spirit has been dismissed, where your dignity has been ignored. One shadow work exercise begins here. Writing to your shadow. Sit in solitude. Allow the hidden parts of you to speak freely onto paper. Write letters from the side of yourself you never let breathe. Your anger, your envy, your shame, give them voice without judgment. Do not censor. Do not rationalize. The act of expression alone begins a dialogue that the mind, left alone, cannot initiate. The page becomes a mirror. The words become companions. You will feel discomfort. You may tremble. You may want to tear it up and run. Resist. The act of confronting is the act of beginning. As you continue, the shadows do not wait quietly. They emerge through projections, the people who irritate, provoke, or wound you. The barista who snaps at you, the colleague who undermines, the friend whose words cut more than they should. Look carefully. What in them triggers the storm within you? Here lies the second exercise. Projection reflection. Observe the intensity of your reaction without acting on it. Ask yourself, which part of myself am I seeing in them? Which part am I refusing to acknowledge? This is the mirror effect. Your shadow dancing in the world outside, calling you to recognition. You may feel resistance, disbelief, anger. These are not obstacles. They are confirmations that the work is needed. The third exercise emerges from your dreams. In the theater of the unconscious, the shadow speaks in symbols, in figures, in drama that defies linear logic. Keep a dream journal. Record not just events, but feelings, colors, textures, sounds, and the strange logic of dream space. Then, in reflection, ask, which part of me is this dream trying to reveal? What am I avoiding? What am I longing for? This is dream dialogue, a sacred conversation with the psyche. Over time, patterns emerge. Characters repeat. Symbols recur. Your shadow is speaking to you in a language you are only beginning to learn. To engage is to listen, and to listen is to begin integration. The fourth exercise is embodied awareness. Shadow is not only in thoughts and dreams. It is in posture, tension, gut reactions, and voice. Notice where your body constricts when certain topics arise. Where do you flinch, clench, or hesitate? Invite these sensations into awareness. Allow them to be seen, felt, and honored. Shadow energy, trapped in the body, is released through acknowledgement. You are not controlling it, but conversing with it. You are learning that psyche resides not only in mind, but in flesh, in breath, in heartbeat. Integration begins in sensation as much as in reflection. And the fifth, the most daring, is active imagination. A technique Jung called sacred and transformative. Close your eyes. Let an image arise. Perhaps it is a figure, a landscape, a symbol, a creature. Step into dialogue. Ask questions. Listen. Let the unconscious respond. Do not rationalize or judge. This is the conversation with the self, the archetypes, the living shadow. Through this exercise, the hidden energies begin to flow, no longer trapped, no longer silent. You may encounter fear, confusion, awe, or ecstasy. These are signs that you are moving toward wholeness, that the soul is awakening to its own depth as the first chapter closes. You notice a tremor, subtle, almost imperceptible, like a doorway has opened inside you. The shadow does not vanish. It waits, it watches, it invites. You realize the work is not optional. It is inevitable. Every human being carries these hidden parts, and each part has a voice longing to be heard, understood, and integrated. To confront the shadow is to confront life itself. And yet, the fear of it is matched by a strange exhilaration, the awareness that beyond the darkness lies a kind of freedom, a power, a truth that ordinary life can never grant. The journey is just beginning. You have written, observed, dreamed, felt, and imagined. But the shadow, infinite in its depth, still has secrets to reveal. And beyond the exercises, beyond the practices, there lies the deeper terrain, the archetypes, the self, and the process of individuation itself, where the shadow finds its home, and the soul its wholeness. Chapter 2 begins with a question that has haunted you longer than you realize. Who am I when no one is watching? The answer cannot be found in the applause of the world, in the approval of others, or in the carefully curated persona you present each day. It resides in the depths you have avoided, the corridors you have refused to enter, the rooms you have locked in the house of your own psyche. To descend into the shadow is to take a journey into your own hidden interior, a place where contradictions live, where guilt and desire collide, and where truths you have denied rise like ghosts from forgotten graves. The first step is recognition. The shadow does not announce itself with a drum roll or a fanfare. It appears subtly, a surge of irritation at a stranger, a pang of envy at a friend's success, a sudden guilt over an action you thought long forgiven. These moments are not incidental. They are breadcrumbs left by your unconscious, guiding you toward what you have denied. Jung wrote that until the unconscious is made conscious, it directs your life, and you call it fate. Every projection, every trigger, every emotional eruption is a reflection, a signpost, a whisper demanding attention. You begin by noticing. You stop blaming the world or other people. You turn your gaze inward. This turning inward is terrifying. You encounter aspects of yourself that feel alien, unworthy, even monstrous. The rage you once justified in silence, the desires you suppressed in fear of judgment, the shame you buried beneath a veneer of competence, all demand acknowledgement. But fear not what you see. It is precisely this recognition that begins the process of liberation. You are not bad. You are not corrupt. You are human, vast, and complex. Shadow work is not self-punishment. It is the excavation of the self, the careful uncovering of hidden treasure in the form of disowned parts. One way to descend is through the exercise of shadow journaling. But deeper than the initial letter writing you may have tried. Here, you engage in dialogue with your shadow as a separate entity. Ask it, why are you here? What do you need me to see? What is your message? Then listen. You may encounter silence or a flood of emotions. Perhaps a memory long buried surfaces, a word you never spoke, a hurt you refuse to feel. Let it speak. Allow the shadow to take shape, to express itself fully. Do not censor. Do not rationalize. Witness it with compassion, and the first seeds of integration take root as you descend. You realize that the shadow is not only personal, it is archetypal. It carries within it the forms of the collective unconscious, the eternal patterns of human experience. In it resides the trickster who disrupts, the mother who devours, the warrior who destroys, the sage who warns. You may see yourself reflected in these forms, and in doing so, you understand that your shadow is not merely your own. It is the echo of countless souls who have struggled, resisted, and survived before you. This gives depth and perspective. Your shadow is not a personal failing. but a doorway into the universal human story, a connection to the vast tapestry of existence. The descent is not only in reflection, but in action. Life will present you with situations that mirror your shadow, often in uncomfortable, unavoidable ways. Perhaps a loved one triggers resentment, a colleague exposes insecurity, a stranger awakens fear. Here lies the second exercise: projection identification. Pause in the discomfort. Ask, which part of me is reacting here? Which part am I refusing to own? Then acknowledge it silently, without judgment. By seeing your own shadow reflected in others, you begin to disentangle projection from reality, and your relationships transform. The world becomes a mirror not of judgment, but of invitation to awareness. Yet the journey is not linear. You may find yourself oscillating between despair and exhilaration, resistance and surrender. This is temporal tension, the push and pull that Jung described as essential for growth. To remain in the tension without fleeing is the true test of courage. The shadow is patient. It waits for your willingness to endure discomfort, to embrace paradox, to sit in ambiguity until insight emerges. You will feel at times as if you are losing yourself. Yet in this loss, you discover what is essential. The ego contracts so that the self may expand. The familiar illusions crumble, and in their place, a deeper authenticity begins to take shape. The descent also demands confrontation with fear itself. You may fear judgment, isolation, or shame. You may fear the intensity of emotion, the truth of desire, the magnitude of your own power. But shadow work is about facing fear without retreat. Consider the exercise of fear mapping. Identify the fears that arise when your shadow emerges. Name them, feel them, trace their origin. Then imagine yourself holding them, walking through them, letting them exist without allowing them to control your choices. Fear becomes not a barrier, but a guide, illuminating the edges of your hidden self. As you go deeper, the shadow begins to teach. You notice patterns repeating, relationships echoing unresolved dynamics, choices reflecting unconscious motives, emotions surfacing that feel disproportionate to circumstance. These are not accidents. They are invitations to understanding. The shadow does not punish. It educates. Each encounter, each trigger, each uncomfortable feeling is a lesson. If you engage fully, with honesty and courage, insight emerges. The part of yourself you once despised or feared carries wisdom, strength, and creativity. By embracing it, you reclaim energy wasted in denial and transform it into power. Here, you meet the paradox at the heart of shadow work. The very parts of yourself you feared are the parts that will ultimately make you whole. The rage, the envy, the fear, the grief, they are not enemies, but allies. They are the raw materials from which authenticity is forged. You begin to see that avoiding them has not protected you. It has diminished you. To integrate shadow is not to eliminate darkness, but to honor it, to understand it, to allow it to dance with light. Only then can the psyche achieve balance. The descent is ongoing. Each day, each encounter, each reflection is a step deeper into understanding. The shadow is infinite, multi-layered and patient. It will reappear in new forms, in new relationships, in new challenges. This is not a flaw of the process. It is its design. The work is lifelong, and yet each step, each recognition, each moment of courage brings you closer to wholeness, closer to self-understanding, closer to the liberation that comes from embracing your own complexity. as Chapter 2 closes. You realize the descent has changed you. The world appears simultaneously harsher and more intimate, more frightening and more alive. You notice subtleties in emotion, in gesture, in encounter that once passed unseen. The shadow is no longer entirely hidden. It is a presence you acknowledge, a companion you have met in the dark. And yet, this is only the beginning. Beyond recognition lies integration. Beyond courage lies transformation. The next chapter awaits, where the exercises deepen and the shadow is no longer merely observed, but woven into the living fabric of your conscious self. Chapter 3 begins with a question that trembles beneath the surface of your awareness. What becomes of a shadow once it is seen? Recognition alone is not enough. To truly engage with the shadow, you must enter into dialogue, allowing its energy to move, reshape, and inform your conscious life. The shadow does not vanish when you shine a light upon it. It transforms. It becomes a guide, a source of creativity, a catalyst for authenticity. And the process of integration, of weaving disowned parts into the fabric of your being, is the alchemical work that turns suffering into insight, fear into vitality, and fragmentation into wholeness. Integration begins with acknowledgement without judgment. The mind rebels against this simplicity. It wants to analyze, rationalize, categorize, and dismiss. But the shadow resists reduction. It demands presence, not intellect. Sit with the aspects of yourself you have long denied, the jealousy that stings, the anger that scorches, the shame that paralyzes, the lust that thrills. Do not explain them away. Do not argue. Simply observe, feel them, let them exist. This act alone is radical. It is the first bridge from exile to belonging, from conflict to reconciliation. Once acknowledged, the shadow begins to speak through action and choice. You notice patterns that once felt uncontrollable, outbursts of emotion, impulsive decisions, compulsions, and you see them with new eyes. You are not separate from these impulses. You are their witness and their steward. Here arises the first shadow integration exercise of this stage, conscious embodiment. Take deliberate action that reflects what your shadow longs to express, but in a manner that is responsible and ethical. If rage seeks voice, channel it through movement, art, or dialogue. If desire stirs, express it through creativity or honest communication. By allowing the energy of the shadow to flow into constructive expression, you reclaim power that was previously dissipated in repression. Another profound avenue is dialogue with archetypes. Jung taught that the shadow often carries archetypal energy: the outlaw, the trickster, the rebel, the lover, the destroyer. These forms are not fictional. They are living psychic structures that shape perception and behavior. When you encounter them consciously, whether in meditation, active imagination, or journaling, you give shape to what was previously formless. Ask the trickster what it wants, the rebel why it resists, the destroyer what it protects. By conversing with these figures, you begin to see the shadow not as enemy but as ally, each archetype offering guidance, insight, and energy for growth. Integration also unfolds in relationships. The people around you become mirrors, reflecting what has been hidden. You are drawn to individuals who awaken parts of your psyche you have ignored. The irritation, the attraction, the envy, the longing. Each is a doorway. The exercise here is projection, reclamation. When you notice a strong reaction to another person, trace it inward. Which aspect of myself am I seeing in them? Which part do I resist acknowledging? Naming it, claiming it, and owning it reduces projection and transforms relationships. The world stops being a battlefield of unconscious projections and becomes a laboratory for self-understanding. Creativity is another powerful vessel for integration. The shadow is often the wellspring of imagination, insight, and originality. Repressed anger, grief, or desire fuels art, writing, music, and innovation. The fourth exercise in this chapter is shadow-inspired creation. Take the energy of your disowned self and give it form in something tangible. Paint, write, compose, sculpt, dance. Allow the shadow to speak through you. The result is not only cathartic, it is revelatory. You begin to recognize that the parts of yourself you feared or despised carry wisdom and vitality that can enrich both your inner and outer world. Yet, integration is not always gentle. It can be disorienting, dislocating, even frightening. You may encounter contradictions you cannot resolve, impulses you cannot fully control, feelings you cannot yet understand. This is natural. Jung described these moments as provisional life, a phase, where the old order dissolves, but the new order has not fully emerged. Patience is essential. The psyche moves at its own pace. You do not force integration. You witness, participate, and allow the process to unfold. In this tension, transformation occurs. In the discomfort, wisdom is born. Shadow work in this phase also calls for ritual and reflection. Mark the process with ceremony, however personal and simple. Light a candle, write a letter to your shadow, walk in silence, or create a private altar. The symbolic act acknowledges that you are entering sacred territory, a space where psyche and life intersect. It reinforces intention, signals respect, and anchors the work in the rhythm of your existence. The integration of shadow is both psychological and spiritual, a dialogue between conscious life and the unconscious depths. Another key principle is embracing paradox. The shadow is neither wholly evil nor wholly good. It contains desire and fear, strength and vulnerability, creation and destruction. Integration does not seek to eliminate contradictions, but to hold them in dynamic tension. You allow the rebel and the caretaker, the lover and the destroyer, the victim and the warrior to coexist. In holding the paradox, the psyche finds balance. You realize that wholeness is not perfection. It is the acceptance of multiplicity, the acknowledgement that light and darkness are inseparable, and that each informs the other. As the chapter draws to a close, the subtle transformation becomes evident. The triggers that once shattered you now teach you. The impulses that once terrified you now energize you. You are no longer a passive recipient of your shadow's influence. You are an active participant in its alchemy. Integration does not erase difficulty, but it reframes it. Life's challenges become invitations to engage, to reflect, to embody the totality of yourself. The exercise is conscious embodiment, archetypal dialogue, projection, reclamation, shadow-inspired creation, ritual, are not mere techniques. They are practices of presence, courage, and transformation. And yet, even as you integrate, the journey extends beyond the personal. The shadow is a gateway not only to wholeness, but to the larger mysteries of psyche and self. It is the path from recognition to individuation, from fear to empowerment, from fragmentation to sacred unity. The shadow is not the end of the journey. It is the threshold. Beyond it lies the deeper terrain, the unfolding of the self, the encounter with archetypal forces, the sacred alchemy of consciousness, Chapter 4. begins with a whisper you have felt, but perhaps never named. There is more than this. More than fear, more than anger, more than what the world tells me I am. It is the voice of the self, calling from the depths, insistent, subtle, undeniable. Individuation, Jung's sacred term for the process of becoming whole, is not a destination. It is a journey through darkness into light, through multiplicity into unity, through shadow into consciousness. It is not self-improvement. It is the path where the fractured ego learns to recognize itself as part of a living, breathing psyche, where the hidden energies within you are no longer enemies but collaborators, where the soul speaks, and you finally listen. The first sign that the path of individuation is calling is a sense of provisional life. The old patterns, once relied upon for security, begin to falter. The familiar ways of thinking, the habitual behaviors, the stories you have told yourself about who you are, they start to feel insufficient. Life presents you with paradoxes, people and situations that frustrate and illuminate simultaneously. Losses that shatter yet awaken insight, desires that conflict yet demand acknowledgement. This tension, uncomfortable and persistent, is not a mistake. It is the hand of the self, stirring, guiding, nudging you toward wholeness. It is the psychic equivalent of a compass pointing inward, toward your own hidden center. The first exercise in this phase is self-reflective dialogue, but with a twist. Here, you do not converse solely with your shadow. You invite the self into the conversation. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and imagine a figure that embodies wisdom, compassion, and the totality of your being. Speak to it and listen. Ask, what is my purpose? What must I integrate? What am I avoiding? The answers will not arrive as logic, but as sensation, image, or subtle knowing. It may be a feeling of expansion in your chest, a symbol in your mind's eye, or a sudden insight that feels like it comes from nowhere. This is the self speaking through the medium of consciousness, guiding the integration of shadow and persona alike. As you continue, the second exercise emerges, identifying and harmonizing complexes. Jung described complexes as clusters of emotions, memories, and associations that operate semi-independently from conscious control. They are often triggered in repetitive ways, pulling you into old patterns, compelling reactions you cannot fully explain. Notice where you are reactive. Trace the emotions to their origin. Name the complex. Allow it to exist, not as a tyrant, but as a teacher. With time and reflection, these complexes can be integrated into conscious awareness, transforming compulsive reaction into deliberate choice. You are no longer at the mercy of unconscious forces. You begin to collaborate with them. The third exercise is dream and active imagination work, deepened for individuation. Your dreams are no longer merely signals of hidden emotion. They are guides to the self. Record, reflect, and dialogue with dream figures. Step into the images consciously, as though moving through a sacred landscape. Allow archetypes to speak, act, and challenge you. The symbols that emerge may be confusing, dissonant, or exhilarating. This is the language of the unconscious, revealing patterns and pathways toward wholeness. Here, myth and psyche converge. The ordinary becomes extraordinary. You begin to recognize that your life is not a random sequence of events, but a story unfolding with symbolic precision, orchestrated by forces within as old and eternal as consciousness itself. Integration at this stage is not only internal but also relational. The self expresses itself through your interactions. You begin to see people as carriers of archetypal energy, mirrors of your shadow and glimpses of your potential. You notice synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that defy explanation, yet feel purposeful. A stranger speaks exactly the truth you needed to hear. A situation arises that challenges you precisely where growth is required. These experiences are not luck or chance. They are the self moving through life, guiding you subtly, teaching you to respond consciously rather than react unconsciously. Here, mindful engagement becomes a practice, observing the interplay of internal and external worlds, discerning patterns, and aligning actions with deeper awareness. Another essential exercise is symbolic creativity. Here, the self communicates through making, painting, writing, movement, music. Allow images and ideas to emerge without control, guided by unconscious impulses. Symbols are potent bridges between the conscious and the unconscious, offering insight and resolution. Through creative expression, you externalize and examine psychic content safely, transforming internal conflict into beauty and meaning. The act itself, rather than the product, is transformative. Shadow becomes integrated, complexes dissolve, and the psyche experiences coherence. Yet individuation is not only about mastery or understanding. It is about humility, surrender, and patience. You encounter sacred paradoxes. Strength arises from vulnerability, clarity from confusion, freedom through acceptance of limits. The ego, once inflated with certainty, must bow to the self. This is the phase Jung called sacred paralysis, moments when the psyche pauses, suspended between fear and awe, uncertainty and revelation, as the self prepares to emerge fully. It is uncomfortable, disorienting, and profoundly necessary. Resistance is natural, but surrender, the willingness to allow the self to guide without insistence on control, opens the way for true transformation. Individuation is also a dance with time. Jung emphasized temporal tension, the awareness of past, present, and future coexisting in consciousness. The shadow carries the weight of unresolved history. The self projects potential yet unrealized. The ego negotiates the moment. Awareness of this tension allows you to live in a dynamic present, where each decision, emotion, and reflection contributes to the unfolding of wholeness. You are both grounded and transcendent, engaged in life, yet guided by the currents of inner wisdom. As Chapter 4 draws to a close, you feel a subtle shift. The shadow's voice is no longer solely disruptive. It contributes, illuminates, and guides. Complexes that once enslaved you now reveal patterns, and archetypal figures speak with clarity. Life is more vivid, more charged, more profound. Yet the journey is far from complete. Individuation does not end in understanding. It culminates in the profound encounter with the self, a meeting of conscious and unconscious, human and archetypal, finite and infinite. This meeting beckons you toward transformation that is both personal and cosmic. The next chapter awaits, where the metaphysical dimensions of the self are explored, where wholeness is revealed not as abstraction but as lived experience, and where the shadow, now integrated, leads you toward the luminous center of your being. Chapter 5 begins, not in thought, but in sensation. You feel it as a subtle tremor beneath the surface of your awareness, a sense that consciousness itself is larger than you imagined. The self, once distant and abstract, now pulses with immediacy. It is not a concept to be understood, but a presence to be inhabited. The shadow, integrated and acknowledged, rests at your side, no longer a spectre but a companion. Individuation has guided you here, through darkness into light, through multiplicity into coherence, yet the horizon stretches farther than the mind can grasp. What lies beyond the ego, beyond the shadow, beyond the familiar landscapes of psyche, is both terrifying and radiant. The sacred dimension of the self, the mystery that psychology can hint at but never fully contain. The first recognition is paradoxical. The self is intimate and infinite, personal and archetypal. You sense it in moments of awe, a sunrise, a storm, a silence so profound it shakes your bones. It is present in dreams that linger upon waking, in synchronicities that feel orchestrated by something greater, in encounters with others that resonate like mirrors of your own soul. You begin to see that the work of shadow integration and individuation has been a preparation, a discipline that tunes your awareness to the subtle frequencies of being. The exercises dialogue, embodiment, creativity, reflection, projection, reclamation were not ends but conduits, leading toward the recognition that the psyche is more than self, and self is more than conscious thought. One of the most transformative experiences at this stage is the recognition of interconnectedness. You feel it as empathy, as reverence, as awe. The distinctions between self and other, internal and external, conscious and unconscious, begin to blur. Archetypes are no longer distant symbols. They are living presences in the world, manifesting in people, events, and landscapes. The shadow, fully acknowledged, resonates in rhythm with the self, revealing that what once appeared dark and chaotic is imbued with purpose and order. You sense that life is not a series of accidents, but a vast, intricate weave, and that every encounter, every reflection, every breath is a thread in the pattern. The sacredness of being emerges in the recognition that the psyche is alive, conscious, and sacred, and that you are both participant and witness in this unfolding. Drama, another exercise at this stage, is contemplative embodiment. Move through your day with awareness of the self's presence. Feel the body as a vessel of consciousness, the breath as a bridge between inner and outer worlds, the heartbeat as a drum marking the rhythm of psyche. Notice your emotions not as problems to be solved, but as living messages, echoes of archetypal forces that guide you toward meaning. Through this embodied awareness, the sacred is no longer an abstract ideal. It is tangible, immediate, and transformative. Every sensation becomes a reminder of the wholeness you are moving toward. The journey also invites creative communion with archetypal energy. Let your art, music, writing, or movement be guided by the archetypal forms within you. The rebel, the lover, the sage, the destroyer, the trickster, all become collaborators in creation. In this way, individuation flows outward, manifesting in the world not as egoic achievement but as authentic expression of the self. Shadow and light converge. Personal and collective converge. Consciousness and life itself begin to resonate in harmony. You sense that true creativity is inseparable from integration. That genius is born not in isolation but in dialogue with the totality of being. At this stage, the mystical and psychological intertwine. You notice moments of sacred pause, where thought dissolves into pure awareness. You feel a sense of unity that transcends ego, time, and space. These glimpses of the eternal are rare, fleeting, yet profoundly instructive. They reveal that the shadow, the ego, and the persona are instruments, conduits for the deeper self, and that wholeness is not about control, but about attunement. The exercises you practiced, shadow journaling, projection, reclamation, active imagination, embodied awareness, symbolic creation, now become ongoing practices of living fully as co-creators with the forces that shape psyche and reality alike. The sacred self also teaches humility and courage. You encounter moments when the unknown challenges you, when inner guidance conflicts with outer expectations, when the familiar dissolves. Yet you recognize that these are not obstacles, but invitations to greater awareness. Each confrontation with the unknown, each surrender to mystery, each embrace of paradox is a step deeper into wholeness. Fear becomes guidance, confusion becomes illumination, and the shadow's old power transforms into creative, generative energy. You realize that individuation is ongoing. The journey never ends, but every step expands consciousness, enriches life, and cultivates depth. The chapter closes in stillness. You feel a strange exhilaration, a profound reverence for the complexity of being. The shadow, once hidden, now hums with vitality. The self, once distant, now pulses within. Life is more luminous, more textured, more alive. And yet, a final invitation remains: to walk this path daily, to listen, to create, to surrender, to witness. This is the sacred rhythm of psyche, a dance between shadow and light, between fear and courage, between you have descended into the shadow, conversed with the archetypes, engaged with complexes, and witnessed the emergence of the self. The exercises were not mere tasks, but thresholds, each a doorway to deeper understanding. The letters to your shadow were not just words on paper. They were prayers, confessions, and claims of existence. The reflections on projections were not moral lessons. They were revelations, mirrors of the psyche in motion. The dream dialogues, the active imagination, the creative expressions, all were invitations to inhabit your totality, to meet fear with courage, to recognize your own infinite capacity for transformation. The journey is paradoxical. By embracing what you feared, you discovered freedom. By acknowledging what you hid, you found strength. By allowing shadow and light to converse, you glimpsed wholeness. Shadow work is not a linear process, but a spiral revisited across the lifespan, deepened with every experience, every encounter, every reflection. The exercises are tools. The shadow is a guide. The self is the horizon, and you are the traveler, willing to walk the path of depth and mystery, aware that each step is sacred. Ultimately, the message is this: the parts of yourself you have disowned are not enemies. They are the lost siblings of your soul, the hidden energies that enliven, the voices that awaken, the keys to authenticity. Integration does not erase darkness. It transforms it. Individuation does not promise perfection. It cultivates wholeness. The self is not a distant ideal. It is the ever-present essence you can inhabit through awareness, courage, and reflection. To engage in shadow work is to engage in life itself, fully, deeply, and courageously. And now, as you sit with these truths, let them resonate within your being. Let the shadow speak. Let the self guide. Let the archetypes inspire. And let the journey continue. The path is never complete, yet every step carries you closer to wholeness, depth, and the luminous mystery at the heart of your existence. You are not separate from life. You are life reflecting upon itself, a conscious presence weaving shadow into light, fear into courage, and fragmentation into sacred unity.